while you were at the University of Wisconsin in Madison that you did you participated in some boycott walks. Could you tell me a little bit about that, if you can remember?
Oh, sure.
What it was like and what happened and how that came about?
Well, I was there on the campus of Wisconsin in the early 70s, and it was a time when there were many demonstrations throughout the United States. Many of them were relative to the Vietnam War, and some of them were relative to the work of migrant workers and advocacy for better conditions for them. That particular movement was led by Cesar Chavez, who was located at that time in California. But one of the major aspects of the boycott was to boycott grapes, which were a major project of the migrant workers, and to boycott some of the key food chains that were, of course, buying from the market in California and elsewhere. So while I was at the University of Wisconsin, we had at least one, if not two, major public demonstrations of people who were supportive of that boycott and marched down the street, one of the main streets in Wisconsin that included one of the major food chain stores that were in that area. So throughout the year, we had been not buying grapes and not at least not buying grapes that were from Wisconsin, or excuse me, from California. So locally grown grapes we could buy, but none of those that were really seen as exploiting the migrant workers. So that, there were other people from the campus, students and faculty. It was a public demonstration organized. I'm not even sure at the time who organized it, but I knew several of the marchers and many of them I did not know.
Yeah. Do you know if there were other sisters there?
There were, because there were several of us. I did know that there were several of us. I don't know. I suppose maybe I would be familiar with about 20 or so that were living in the dorms, in one particular dorm on the campus that summer. And we'd oftentimes meet at the Newman Center for liturgies. So didn't know all of them, but I got to know probably 5 or 6 of them quite well. So it would have been from among that group of sisters. I don't recall that there were any other Sisters of Mercy. They were sisters from other congregations, but we were all studying at one of the departments on the campus of the University of Wisconsin there in Madison. So we worked with the Newman Center really for that boycott, I think, activity. Mm-hmm.
Did you make posters? Was there a speaker?
Well, there were always, these, they're not unlike the Black Lives Matter movements, any of the demonstrations that we have going on currently. There are always posters, there's always speakers, there's always a chant to keep the crowd kind of both focused and also kind of coordinated. So yes, all of that. And did I make any posters? I do not remember that. I might have, but I would not be. I know I carried one, but I don't know if I made it or not.
Yeah, and was that your first time participating in?
Let's see. That'd be hard to remember. I had walked in several marches, but I have a feeling that would have been my first. Yeah, since that time I had walked in other marches in different places, but I suspect that might have been my first one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know how it was with the community at that time, but like, did you have to ask anybody if it was okay to go or let them know, or was it something that you just could do?
Well, I don't recall asking anyone. There wasn't a necessity to get permission. If we were in any danger of being arrested, in other words, if we intended to do anything that would have been either conscientious objection or civil disobedience, we had a process for notifying the congregation and getting a certain blessing to do that kind of activity. But for the demonstrations that were seen as more ordinary, if I might use that word, or more less likely to occasion any arrest, there wasn't a need to seek any permission or to let anyone know.
Yeah, I was just trying to get a sense of if it was common at that time for the sisters to be participating in social justice issues on that level.
Well, for the Sisters of Mercy, I would put it this way: there was a common acceptance of your doing that. I don't know that I would say there were large numbers of us doing it, but it was not perceived as being on the fringe of what was acceptable within the congregation. So in different areas of the country, definitely there would have been Sisters of Mercy participating in different marches around that issue. It was pretty universally known that we wanted to work with the migrant workers to gain some better and humane conditions for them. The actual marching was perhaps not everyone's way of participating. Some were letter writing, some would be doing the work of educating people, and some were just doing the boycotting by not buying the grapes. But there were always a certain number that throughout the United States were doing the actual marching, because we wanted others in the church and in the communities in which we were living to know that we supported this effort on the part of the migrant workers.
Yeah. Do you think that the boycotts helped bring some like vocality to it, or vocalness?
Well, it did. I mean, it did. And there, of course, were lots of other elements that brought focus to it and brought visibility. But certainly the boycotts were a part of that. And they did succeed to the extent, not they singularly, but the efforts to bring visibility and to bring a stronger voice to the voice of the migrant workers themselves succeeded in contracts being renegotiated, in better conditions being provided for workers in terms of their hours of work and also in terms of their living situation. So now over several years, nothing happened dramatically, but over several years, and Cesar Chavez himself, who began as being seen as an individual that was kind of on the edge of society, and in some places persons even perceived him, I think, as being, well, if not a criminal, at least on the outs with the law. But he rose to the stature of a real leader of people, and by the time of his death quite clearly recognized as a person who had brought justice to that to his own community there, to the migrant workers whom he represented. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you were telling